I would define 28 Years Later as okay, mediocre, average, and, half pie? Is that a phrase people use? Anyway, my point is that the movie is not perfect. But there's a strong reason I feel this way. Like many people, I was actually excited to see 28 Years Later. The trailer was great, the cast was promising, and it had been a while since a good zombie film had come out. So in preparation, I decided to re-watch 28 Days Later, and I was reminded of how good of a film this is. The pacing is tight and efficient, the suspense is real, the infected feel threatening, and the world and characters are interesting. But when we got to that last scene with Jim, Selena, and Hannah together with the hope of rescue, I thought, this doesn't need a sequel. It was perfect. The story is over, the infected are dead, and the heroes got away. It was a happy ending to a bleak and desperate story. Everyone had had their character arcs, and the story fulfilled its themes. So there really wasn't anything left to say. But nope, we gotta dig up this old IP and milk it for everything it's worth, don't we? Now, Hollywood's maniacal goals of conquering entertainment with the endless slog of reboots and remakes is well known at this point, but it seems like 28 Years Later slipped under everyone's collective radar a little bit. I mean, we should have known what this film was from the start, which is just another production banking on the fact that there is some guaranteed income because of a pre-existing fan base that will certainly be watching the new series. But that's not to say it's a soulless film, however. 28 Years Later has a lot of effort put into it. The world and characters are still deep and interesting, and I think that Danny Boyle made the editing stand out just as the original had. And, unlike other reboots, it didn't spit on its predecessor or shove some over-the-top political messaging in our faces. But at the same time, the movie never really feels like a 28 Days Later sequel. With a few tweaks to the lore, this movie could have had a whole new zombie franchise of its own. The infected, for example, bear little resemblance to the original movie, as they have evolved into a whole new subspecies of human. And of course, we aren't following Jim or Selena's story any longer, so it's not like there's any real narrative thread tying this all together. In fact, this movie actually replaces a lot of the pre-established canon and leaves huge gaps in the events of the outbreak. For example, we never get an explanation as to how the infected returned to the UK after they all starved to death and were completely wiped out, or how the world dealt with the second outbreak in Europe after 28 weeks later. However, my point still stands that this has become all quite messy to explain. It would have been far easier to just turn this into a separate franchise, instead of trying to tie this new trilogy into a story that has no room to grow. I mean, if you're going to change the characters, the time period, the lore, and location of the story, then why not do something completely different? Why not create a whole new brand of zombie films that has nothing to do with 28 Days Later? Oh, right. And this has become the sticking point for me here. It has become obvious that 28 Years Later is just another in a long line of desperate attempts by Hollywood to pump money out of a once beloved IP. Sure, it's not as egregious or as offensive as previous remakes have been, but in principle, it has the same goal, which is to take advantage of a famous brand. They don't want to make something new because that involves risk of failure, and therefore, loss of revenue. Instead, these corporations want a safe bet, something that they can stake their money in that has a guaranteed result, and that means slapping a familiar logo on a movie. But what that ends up doing is making a vacuum of unoriginal ideas and a creative backlog where we're watching rehashed plot lines or loosely connected reboots. But the thing is, we don't need another remake of a classic film or a reboot of our favorite franchise. We need new and fresh ideas with new stories and different characters. And granted, 28 Years Later tried to do something different, but it still proves that even when you hire great talent and aim for quality, reviving a franchise can still feel hollow if it's built on a foundation that simply doesn't need to exist. So like I said at the beginning of the video, this movie is not perfect. But more importantly, it could never be perfect, because we already got that back in 2002. But what did you think? Did you like 28 Years Later? Are you excited for the franchise to continue? Or are you tired of seeing rebooted franchises just as I am? Let me know down in the comments section below. As well, if you could hit that like and subscribe button, that would be greatly appreciated. But if that isn't enough for you, then become a member of the channel and share the video. And like always, I'll see you on the next one.